What's up everyone? Today we're looking at Grisaia no Kajitsu, a visual novel I read solely because of the phrase orchard cum prison. Right off the bat I entered Grisaia with no expectations whatsoever. At a casual glance, it looked like just a regular harem visual novel filled with sex and fan service. Plus, as I said at the start of the video, the summary had the words orchard cum prison, and the second I saw that, curiosity got the best of me. If you can hear those words and not wonder what this thing is about, I think one of us has issues. So imagine my surprise when Grisaia not only barely had any fan service in it, but was actually really good. Yeah, if there's one thing you can take from this video, let it be that. Grisaia is a fantastic story and definitely worth your time. That being said, what exactly is this thing about? The setting goes like this. Our main character Yuji signs up for a school in an attempt to have a normal school life, more on that later, and transfers into Mihama Academy, which has a total of 6 students who are each there for extensive reasons. After finally showing up, he meets and befriends each of the students and attempts to settle down and have some kind of normal life, despite how unusual his school and classmates are. And along the way, he learns more about each of them and must help them overcome their tragic past, all the while trying to overcome his own baggage himself. It may not sound like the stuff of wonders, but trust me, it is. The plot here is deceptively smart. Much of it doesn't come until the end though. You can cut Grisaia into 2 halves. The first is the common route, which follows Yuji and the others through their daily antics and works to establish each of the characters and build relationships for the second half. The second half of the game is where you can start going down character-specific storylines, and let me say right off the bat, these stories are dark. For the most part, the common route is a pretty lighthearted, comedic bit of harem-y fun, but once you start getting into character backstories, Grisaia becomes a totally different kind of game. You start learning the reasons behind why each of the different girls are there and how they ended up in the school in the first place, and things quickly get more than a little depressing. Death, kidnapping, arson, and identity crises are just a few of the things you'll encounter, and as jarring as it all is, it actually works really well. As lighthearted and comedic as Grisaia can be, it's always grounded in a sense of reality that makes sure the story never gets too goofy or too off the wall. Plus, there are many subtle bits that allude to a lot of the serious stuff that'll come into play near the end. So once the dramatic parts actually start to unfold, it actually meshes really well and feels like a natural progression of the story. It never feels contrived or forced when something serious happens or when the serious parts are broken up with more lighthearted comedy bits. Though what really helps this, and is perhaps Grisaia's greatest strength, is just how well written it is. This game isn't just funny, it's hilarious. There were many scenes where I had to put down my computer and catch my breath because I was laughing too hard, and when things started to get more serious I found myself getting very interested and engaged with the ideas and themes being presented. Whether it's comedy or drama, there are never any points in the story that feel rushed or haphazardly done. Each description and piece of dialogue flow into one another seamlessly, making for a very pleasant read. This is actually a really good thing since Grisaia is one of the longest visual novels I have read in a long time. The common route alone takes nearly 20 hours of reading, and if you decide to do all the different routes, you're going to easily double that. Do be warned though, some of this stuff is not for the faint of heart. Once the drama starts, it hits hard. Some of the stuff that happens in Grisaia is just messed up on a lot of levels. If you're the type of person who gets easily bothered, tread carefully here. All this wouldn't be possible without the characters though, and Grisaia more than delivers in this regard. Yuji may very well be one of the best protagonists I've seen, and definitely one of the most interesting characters in this story. Everything about him separates him from the usual harem protagonist. He catches a girl naked and he barely bats an eye. Someone hits on him and he shrugs. He's skilled, witty, strong, and most importantly, tragic. We're given bits and pieces of who he is, what he does, and what his past is like, but nothing concrete. To give you the short version though, he's probably the most twisted person in this story. But he never wallows in self-pity or goes on and on about how rough he's had it. His life sucks, he knows that, and he doesn't let it dominate him. He's trying to get past it, that's the whole point of the story. That's not to undermine the rest of the cast, mind you. At a glance they may appear to be nothing special, but as the story progresses it quickly becomes clear that there's more to each of them than meets the eye, and when you start going through their roots and learning what made them how they are and why they're there now, you gain a newfound respect for each of them. Is anything new or innovative? Not particularly, but the girls go outside the typical harem archetypes, and that's a plus in my book. Usually when I go through a new story I can always point to a specific 1 or 2 characters and say they're the best, but I can't really do that with Grisaia. Each and every character is fantastic and well written with a deep and compelling root in their own way. Whether or not you like them is entirely up to your personal taste, but it's definitely not the story's fault. Each of the characters are, for lack of a better word, awesome. Though if anyone's curious, the girl with the box cutter ended up becoming my favorite. When you get right down to it, Grisaia almost seems nearly perfect in every area. If it has a major flaw, I'd say it's the length. Grisaia may very well be a case of too much of a good thing. Having sat down and read through the thing start to finish, it got incredibly tiresome going through all the different routes and endings. This isn't helped by some of the flashbacks and routes really dragging and overstaying their welcome, and slowing the pace down to a crawl at times. To put it another way, even though I was enjoying myself, I started getting really tired of Grisaia as I was reading. By the time I cleared the 3rd route, I was outright exhausted, and it was a real struggle to read the last couple routes. It was no fault of the game, mind you. Each route is good, the game is just long enough that you'll be worn out way before it is. A lot of it will depend on how much you are invested in each of the different characters. When it came time for me to hop into some of the routes for the girls I didn't really care about, it felt a lot slower than routes featuring someone I liked. If you can't get behind the slice of life style common route, I can guarantee you'll have a bad time too, since that's the bulk of the game. I love this thing, but whenever I read it, I struggle going start to finish with just a single route, let alone all 5. This one is definitely a visual novel I'd recommend taking a break on if you start getting tired, because more often than not, the pace is not going to pick up anytime soon. While I'm nitpicking, I may as well mention another gripe I have for the game's endings. Grisaia has a total of 10 different endings, 2 for each of the different routes, 1 good ending and 1 bad. In principle, I have nothing against this, but the endings, well, they suck. Actually, it'd be more accurate to say some of the endings just leave something to be desired. There are only 1 or 2 endings in the game that I'd call outright bad, but compared to some of the build-up and quality of the story overall, some of them are way too convenient given what happens to some of them. The way the different routes wrap up is by far the sloppiest part of the game. I'm all for happy endings and everything, mind you, but there was just a little bit too much of a rush in wrapping some stories up, and to be frank, how some of them ended is just weird. Among other things, on the technical side, this game also supports a lot of good visuals and music. Say what you will, but Grisaia is a gorgeous game no matter what you think, with awesome character sprites and soothing songs. Not to mention a number of convenient bonus features that let you download pictures, music, promotional material, and reread any scene you want. There's a lot of polish to it that had me pleasantly surprised, and I recommend checking it out as you go along. I hear there are plans for a proper Western release of the game. I'll definitely be picking that up for the soundtrack if nothing else. Going back to the start of the video, I read Grisaia expecting a goofy harem hentai. What I got was a surprisingly well written and thoughtful storyline about learning how to cope with different kinds of loss and how it can bring people together. Any complaints I have with this thing are as minor as they get. I had a good time reading this, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel, Grisaia no Mekyu. This is one hell of a good visual novel. Check it out.